Well, it took 13 years to oust the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria. He and his family have safely exiled to Russia. There is jubilation on the streets, but what comes next for the Western Asian country? Latest reports coming from Damascus, Mohammed Al-Bashir has been appointed as the transitional prime minister. He is a key official in the administration overseen by the group that topples the Assad government. The head of the main opposition party, Hadi al-Barha, was also given some clarity. He says Syria should have an 18-month transition period to establish a safe, neutral and quiet environment for free elections. Safe, neutral and quiet. These three words are subjective in Syria. With so many different parties involved in the country, the future remains in grey. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the group that launched the late November offensive and toppled the government, it was created by the Islamic State in 2012, then declared allegiance to al-Qaeda a year later. And in 2017, severed ties with a group to join hands with other local factions. So there are multiple rebel factions that control different parts of the country. HTS's leader, Abu Mohammed Al-Julani, gave a victory speech after the fall of Damascus. He spoke about a new history being written in the region. Whether the group will continue to run its parallel government of Syrian Salvation Government or cooperate with the opposition parties to hold elections is something we will have to wait and see. So it has been announced that the opposition or the HTS's leader or commander, Abu Mohammed Al-Julani, he gave a victory speech after the fall of Damascus. He spoke about a new history being made and being written in the region, whether the group will continue to run its parallel government of Syrian Salvation Government or even cooperate with the opposition parties to hold elections is something that we'll have to wait and see. But now there has been a new announcement that there is a new prime minister in charge. We'll have to wait and see if that prime minister will work with the rebels or will work with the opposition and foster a peaceful election in the next 18 months, which the rebels have proposed will be a good transition period for the country to heal and to go back to elections. Right now, we do understand that Bashar al-Assad has sought asylum in Russia. Russia did indicate that Bashar al-Assad and his family are in Moscow or are in Russia for a period that they did not determine. This political situation in Syria is getting clearer by the day as many Syrians go to the streets and celebrate the ouster or the fall of the Bashar al-Assad government. All right, so who will run Syria in the next 18 months? Dmitry Babich is a deputy foreign editor at Komsomolskaya Pravda Daily in Moscow. Mr. Babich is now joining us on the show. Welcome to the show. It's good to see you. Help us understand the matrix here. We have Bashar al-Assad fleeing to Russia. The HTS's commander wants to be the new prime minister or has been promoted to be the new prime minister of Syria. The opposition says an 18-month transition period is feasible. And then the US says they want to engage with the rebels, something that Russia has dismissed. What role can Russia play at this juncture?
Well, I think Russia can be kind of a mediator between the new authorities and the remnants of the state that existed under the Bashar and Hafez Assad dynasty. However, I'm not sure about that because I'm really puzzled by the reaction of the Western media. They're all jubilant about what they call change in Syria. And at the same time, I read, for example, in Le Figaro, the French daily, that the leader of that movement which took power in Syria is, I quote, one of the most wanted jihadists on the planet Earth, Abu Muhammad Al-Julani. And the newspaper, just like other Western newspapers, it reports that basically this movement which took power, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is a descendant of Al-Qaeda. It is a descendant of Jabhat al-Nusra, the terrorist organization that kidnapped journalists, including Western journalists, that killed the POWs, the soldiers, that killed a lot of minorities, people from minorities in Syria. So what we see now is the usual unholy alliance of modern Western powers and jihadist movements, really radical Sunni jihadist movements in Arab countries. It's amazing, but Israel is also part of that unholy alliance because it's very strange. Israel rushed to occupy a part of Syria right after the departure of President Assad. And at the same time, Israel says they want to have good relations with this new Islamist government. How can you have good relations with an Islamist government when you are an Israeli? Every Islamist organization has in its rules, has in its program, the destruction of the state of Israel. And so what we see is just a very, very strange situation when the West simply lost itself in its own hypocrisy.
All right. Just quickly before I let you go, just now that you've mentioned the West, what can the Arab world or the West do to avoid Syria from becoming another Afghanistan or Libya? Very quickly.
Well, I think Arab world would support the Syrian president more when he was in power. And also the West could lift at least some of the sanctions from Syria. Let me remind you that Syria is the only country in the world since the beginning of the 20th century that had a civil war and that had sanctions imposed on it after the civil war. All the countries in the world, even after the Bolshevist revolution, countries of the world helped those states which went through their civil war. The Western charity organizations helped Russia after it went through the civil war in 1917. With Syria, it was the opposite. The country was impoverished by the war, and then the West imposed sanctions on it, making the suffering of the people even greater. Okay. Now that this, I quote Le Figaro, that this one of the most wanted jihadists on the planet Earth is in power in Syria, I don't think there is much we can do, the West or the Arab world, to prevent him from doing something terrible. Also, let me tell you that basically the Western media did not report it, but again, you can read it in some even Western publications such as Berliner Zeitung, that actually Assad's people, the Syrian government soldiers, they had fights with Sunni rebels from Hamas, with Sunni rebels from other Islamist organizations. There is a big difference between Sunni extremists who attacked Israel on the 7th of October, committed a terrible crime, and the so-called axis of resistance, headed by Iran, which comprised Syria's Assad and minorities of Syria, such as the Alawites, such as the Christians.
Dimitri?
I am really, really sad about the fact that the West has now turned against those very groups which it brought to power in Syria.
Mr. Dimitri, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're out of time. Thank you very much for giving us time and for talking to us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.